Well, good morning, attendees. Welcome to JIE's session on leadership and influence as engineers. I'll now allow President-elect Oneil Joseph to begin.
Thank you, Engineer Townsend. Welcome, esteemed panelists, fellow engineers, and members of the public to our first webinar of the year hosted by the Mechanical Engineering Division. This year's theme, ladies and gentlemen, is engineering, the driver for manufacturing, production, economic growth, and health. The theme for this discourse is Beyond the Numbers, Leadership and Influence as Engineers. And so on behalf of Council of the JIE, we encourage you to stay with us for this short session, and we can guarantee that we will you will have some very good takeaways and that you can utilize your experience in today's session in your organization to drive productivity and engagement optimally. I must also pause to acknowledge the vision and experience of our chair of the Mechanical Engineering Division for quickly enacting this event, perhaps within minutes of its conceptualization. As a matter of fact, we have an impressive lineup of experienced engineers who themselves have played critical leadership role beyond just the routine engineering functions that we all are accustomed to. In other words, they've gone beyond the numbers themselves and I've known some personally to be influential, not just to me as an individual, but also to the engineering fraternity. We're going to be using this opportunity to delve deeper into the background of our panelists. But let me just quickly give their names, and as you can see there on your profile, you will see the members of the panel, starting with Engineer Rick Case, Engineer Natalie Sparks, Engineer Peter Suah, Engineer Marvin Campbell as members of the panelists. So just I'll give a quick rundown of their background. Very experienced lineup here. You're talking about perhaps over 100 years of experience. Don't look on the hairless scalps of some. But let's start with Engineer Rick Case. First of all, Engineer Rick Case is the Director of Engineering Services at JPS, former Director of Systems Operations, and he's also registered as a professional engineer. You're talking about over 32 years of experience in the electric utility industry. He's also a professional project manager in his profession. We also have with us Engineer Natalie Sparks, the only flower among the thorns. You would have heard of the need to restore the powerhouse at Jamaica that went down a few years ago. Engineer Sparks was given the responsibility as manager for the powerhouse restoration, and I can say safely that that project is providing fruits. She's also the former production and maintenance manager. That's the role that I know her very well in. She's a professional chemical engineer registered with PERB, professional project manager, and 20 plus years of experience in bauxite and alumina sector. Certainly, she's also the past president of the Jamaica Institute of Engineers, and I was quite happy to serve under her leadership as honorary treasurer. We also have an esteemed member of our panel here with us, and you're talking about somebody with a very, very critical engineering experience and background. We're talking about Mr. Peter Suah, Engineer Peter Suah, sorry. And forgive me if I pronounce your name incorrectly, but it's you can correct me when you come on. Suah.
Well, yes.
Right, good, thank you. Again, you're looking at 30 years as founder, principal engineer, and president of the Antillian Engineering Associates in Orlando, Florida, USA. You're talking about 41 years of professional experience in geotechnical engineering. And by the way, Mr. Suah, we may need to talk as head of engineering at UTech. This is a critical area that we want to strengthen in our university. We're talking about applied geophysics and heavy construction. Those are the areas in which he has over 40 years of experience. Has been working in the US for a while, also in the Bahamas and the Eastern Caribbean. And guess what? He's also a registered professional civil engineer in Florida, but also in the country of Jamaica. Now, last but certainly not least, engineer Marvin Campbell, CEO of Wicon. And let me just mention immediately that he's the immediate past president of the Jamaica Institute of Engineers. Again, somebody under whom I've served as honorary treasurer. So I can speak to his very clear vision and ability to spot nonsense, one of his critical skill sets. In addition to being the current CEO of Wicon, he's the former director of distribution operations at JPS. Also a registered civil engineer, civil and structural engineer in the country of Jamaica and in the US, with over 25 years of leadership experience in engineering, project management, and commercial operations. Former lecturer at the University of Technology as well. And as I've mentioned, immediate past president of the Jamaica Institution of Engineers. So as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, an impressive lineup of panelists to talk to you about leadership in engineering today. Let us pause, therefore, to go into our talk, our main course today, to talk about beyond the numbers, leadership and influence. And let me just give you a quick rundown of how we will run today's session. We will have a brief overview of each of the panelists' own particular experience in leadership and engineering. And they'll spend about 2 or 3 minutes elaborating on that. So each of the panelists will go into that. And then we will begin to field questions and pull out from them a bit more than they may have given in that 2 or 3 minutes. Once that is through, we will take now an interactive session with you, the audience, members of the audience, in terms of questions and answers, and so on and so forth, before we go into the closing remarks that will finally conclude today's event. So without any further from me, your chair this evening, and by the way, if I didn't say it, Oneil Josephs, President-elect, yes, it was said, of the Jamaica Institution of Engineers. We will now take each of the candidates' initial remarks, starting with Engineer Rick Case, Director of Engineering Services at JPS.
Thank you, Oneil. And thanks to the JIE for hosting this session. It's hopefully for all the participants, it will have all the takeaways that you promised. My leadership journey at JPS, I believe, started from my first engineering role. I did not necessarily have persons reporting to me directly, but I was responsible for several persons working with me to safely manage the grid itself. After just 2 years on the job, I was promoted to become to more senior engineering roles, now with direct responsibility for people, and progressively moved through the company in other managerial and director roles to where I'm now the Director of Engineering Services at JPS. My scope and responsibility allows me to influence and collaborate, not just within the company itself, but outside the company, internationally, regionally, internationally, with stakeholders such as the regulators, the ministry, CARICOM Energy, CARILEC, which is the Caribbean Regional Group for Electric Utilities, several special interest groups right across the globe in areas such as smart grid, grid protection systems, utility automation, and disaster management. And the universities, other utilities, peer utilities, both UTEC and UE, where I serve as members of on different boards there. And I still get great joy from all the interactions with these various stakeholder groups. I see my role as nation building for Jamaica. I have a bold vision for the energy sector itself. I pride myself in looking at the big picture and trying to bring all the pieces, the interactions together to create comprehensive solutions, effective solutions. And usually what I leave with is that the answer is always in the room. It's really how do you get persons to work together, collaborate, and deliver on that. Thank you.
The answer is in the room. Thank you very much, Engineer Rick Case, for that very short but succinct presentation on your experience. So at this time, we will run right into the only flower among the thorns today, rose among the thorns today, Engineer Natalie Sparks, to give her brief overview as well.
Thank you,
Engineer
Mr. Chair.
Sparks.
Thank you, Engineer Oneil. I want to say, first of all, that once we started this session, I have been impressed with just looking at the lineup of the persons who are here. And I want to say to JIE, well done. You are continuing and building strong. So well done, JIE. Well, I started my career as a young engineer in the sugar industry. And if you think about it, being in the sugar industry as a young engineer, female, around persons who are your grandfathers, and also who knew the industry like the back of their hand, and being told that as a young engineer, you have to know, explain to them, think that they know inherently to the point where they can boil sugar better than anybody else that I know. And here comes this young engineer from St. Augustine with her grandiose ideas as to how to get this thing done properly. So I'll give you a story while I go through my history of getting to leadership. I could call it my grandfather. He called me one day while he was sending me to the boiler floor to get something done, sending me, his boss. And he said, you know, young engineers, you can hear my pain, but until you feel my pain, right? You can't lead me. You can't give me any suggestion. You can't be part of this team. So you have to feel the pain. You have to be there from sun up to sundown. You have to be in the room to hear discussion. You have to listen. And I took that as a young engineer to my journey into the then Alcan, Jamaica. So coming from a sugar industry whereby they mothered you, they fathered you, but they were also strong in ensuring that you got it right. I appreciated the listening that is needed to lead people. So when I got back to Alcan, Jamaica, here I am now in a multinational company with all the technologies. You're having persons from around the world, and you're seeing countries and persons from around the world in your same discipline. However, the communication skill, how you dealt with persons, how you listen to lead persons became more obvious. And therefore, as an engineer going through the leadership ranks from superintendent to team leader to manager to more senior management team across the entire bauxite sector in the Alcan group, working with, and I just say from now, the Russians and persons roll their eyes, but they have something to add. The Chinese, the Australians, the Canadians, the listening tool and understanding where persons' viewpoint comes from the sugar industry has held up as I led a team. So what I've found as leaders and as engineers is that we come with the problem solving, we come with the critical thinking, right? So we are expected to have that. That is our natural ability because we were trained that way. But as you move around the ranks and as you become leaders, you now have to hone It's considered to be the softer skill, but necessary skills. You have to now build the communication, the empathy. How do you lead a team while appreciating that in the team, you might have persons who really don't think that you're that smart and will act up in that room. It builds your communication skills. It builds your strength. At one point in time, I was told that I was feared but revered. At one point in time, I was called, don't laugh, I was called Miss Thatcher. I'm still called Miss Thatcher on part of my organization. However, at the same point in time, when there's a problem, persons come to this room. And that is why, as I moved from Alcan, Jamaica, and I just put it out there now, it's interesting. The Russians have always said it. If there's one person who left Windalco that needs to come back with me, and I can walk through the door, because the communication skill that I've learned from them and how you deal with persons, being frank and open, as you lead a team is important. The numbers are there, but you also have to be transparent. You also have to understand the person across the table as a leader to grow in an organization. I'm now at Jamalco. I have found that with the critical thinking, the communication skills, the empathy, understanding the issues on the ground from the persons who are feeling it, has bode me well in Jamalco. So at Jamalco, I came into the production. Actually, I came in to transition them from Alcoa to a standalone entity. So they were no longer having a big brother company. So I was hired in to do the transition from a international integrated company to a standalone company. So I came in as their transition coordinator. And within a couple of months, I had to do transition coordinator and the capital manager work. So therefore, and between that capital manager work, we then transitioned into me doing production and maintenance manager work. As Ricky said, I like to deliver, and I'm very task-oriented. Person will tell you that I really don't miss deadlines, right? Execution from my side is really good, right? I have learned, however, that even with the task-oriented focus, the numbers, you sometimes have to step back. You actually have to sometimes allow your team to somewhat fail for them to jump to the next level. Painful as engineers to see that happen, but as a leader, you learn it as you go along. So therefore, in the production maintenance role, got to understand and got to lead over 1,000+ persons in one organization. Then we had our major fire in 2021. And my managing director looked around the room of the management team and said, we have a short time to deliver by the powerhouse, and we need someone who has good project management skill and who executes within time and will take no prisoners. Unfortunately, that dropped on me. So therefore, I was then handed the mandate to return the powerhouse and to return Jamalco back to production, and then to look at their long-term strategy to make them independent, viable, back to where they were before the fire, if not better. So we're building back not only better, but stronger. And I'm hoping that once this is done, our team members in the group, the leaders in the group that we are developing as we build back the powerhouse and build back the plant will be, as Ricky said, nation builders. They'll be here to help Jamaica to go to the next level, because I do believe that the engineers that we have, they are fantastic. And the younger ones, as Peter would say, they are some of the brilliant ones I've seen in the longest while, right? They are smart, they take no prisoners, they want the results. They sometimes are much more impatient than I am, but as a leader in the group, once you hone them properly, I expect them to do great things. That's my brief. And I'll take questions as we go along.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Engineer Sparks. So we heard earlier from Engineer Case that the answer is in the room. But I'm hearing also that unless you feel my pain, you cannot lead me, right? And I'm also hearing that even with the task-oriented focus, you will need to step back. And in strange enough, I'm sure I heard it, you may need to also allow persons to feel for them to see themselves sometimes. Leading over 1,000+ persons in 2021. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Engineer Sparks. Getting really excited about hearing what we've been hearing and what we will be hearing shortly. We have still 2 other exciting panelists. I wish I was on public TV. I'd go and take a break now and then come back. Right. But let's move on. We're gonna have Engineer Peter Suah to give his few minutes as well. Welcome, Engineer Suah.
Morning. Thank you very much. And again, let me begin by thanking the JIE for asking me to participate on this panel discussion this morning. This question of going beyond the numbers and sort of the human side of engineering is something that's very near and dear to me, and it's something I feel very strongly about. And in many ways, I look back at my career and see that I can see certain critical points that have led to where I am now. My career has not been a straight line progression. It has gone off in different directions over the years, probably sometimes in directions that one wouldn't expect. But in each of those diversions in a different direction, I've learned things and skills that over the years have become very valuable in my role as a leader. Now, just to kind of put it in perspective, I really sort of became exposed to leadership at a very young age, probably 12 or 13 years old, when I became a day camp counselor at the Kingston YMCA. And that was the first time when, I really learned how to be responsible for other people and people in your care. The second probably major turning point was when I transferred to the engineering faculty at UWI and went to Canada Hall. And that to me was probably one of the most significant points in my career in terms of exposure to leadership and leadership training. Of course, many of us are familiar with Canada Hall. Many of my colleagues, classmates, and friends have distinguished themselves in the engineering profession, not just in Jamaica, but throughout the region, the Caribbean region, and also in other parts of the world, as far away as Canada and Botswana. Canada Hall graduates have distinguished themselves. And also not even just in the fields of engineering, also in medicine and in management and all of these other areas. And I cannot overstate the importance of life on Canada Hall, in part because of the cooperation in terms of the academic tasks that we had to complete. But life there was far more than that in terms of, the development of students as a whole person, not just somebody who's just crunching the numbers and beating the books. There was a wider aspect to life in terms of interpersonal relationships, leadership, supervision, motivation, assisting, correcting. And a lot of times you're working with people or interacting with people who don't necessarily share your point of view or your experience or your values necessarily, but at the end of the day, the overriding factor was that as a community we had to move forward and get things done. And the beauty of it, I think, was in the mentorship that I was exposed to some very capable leaders. I learned from them, and over the course of my tenure there, also became a leader and was able to transition some of those skills into my professional career as I moved forward. I say this because one of the things that I learned over the years that the engineering profession it's driven by relationships. We talk about the numbers, but the work is actually being done by people, by real people, and people have things that matter to them as well. We're not just robots punching numbers. We have lives, we have families, we have fears, we have aspirations, and all of those things have to be taken into account so that we can continue to function at a very high professional level. So I think that it is important that as leaders, we learn some of what people refer to as these softer skills, not just the hard analytics and the calculations, but also what makes what makes us tick, what makes our coworkers tick, what makes our supervisors tick, what makes our, the people who we have some supervisor responsibility for, what makes them tick. And all of those things are very important. And I've really tried to focus on that over the years, and it has certainly served well in terms of my ability to lead. So again, thanks for having me, and I look forward to a very spirited discussion this morning. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Engineer Suah. Again, what we're seeing emanating from just 3 persons presenting so far of the 4, and by the way, this is a very small sample size to be able to look at the spectrum of leadership in engineering, but what we're getting is a drill down, a deep drill down, well, a good drill down of a kind of a variety of experiences. But what I'm seeing emanating is our engineering leadership styles. So Engineer Suah mentioned the need for interpersonal relationships. Profession is driven by relationships. That's what he said. He also mentioned that he emphasized on the human side of engineering. So in essence, the upbringing is what I saw coming out of his presentation. His early nurturing as a child at Kingston YMCA at 12 years old, and how he progressed on Canada Hall in St. Augustine and the exposure there, and then how he has managed to be able to package that and use that as his own rule book in terms of interpersonal relationships, interactions, and moving forward as a community. Very, very good views there given by Engineer Peter Suah. And it is getting really, really exciting already. But we have our final panelist, Engineer Campbell, sorry, who will cover his area. Sorry, I just trying to find my screen here on my Zoom platform. Forgive me. Right, good. Right, Engineer Marvin Campbell, who will be also giving us his 3 minutes very, very quickly. And I just want to say this, that, as a leader in engineering, this gentleman has given me a little nugget some time ago. We had a little, and I won't share the detail, we had a little experience, both of us together, and he said, Oneil, I spot the foolishness in this. And he was able to identify what the foolishness was. And I was guided and cautioned by his recommendation. So very, very keen individual here. Let us hear what he has to say. Engineer Campbell, kindly go ahead.
Morning, everyone. To our panelists and to our first to have joined all the participants. So, interestingly, I think my journey to leadership per se started, I think, in high school. I went to Cornwall College, and I think very early in the day, I realized that the guys who had the most influence in the school at the time were not necessarily the smartest, but somehow they were able to connect and to influence and to get persons aligned to their vision, even if their vision wasn't in the best interest of the school or the persons that were following them. And so very early, I realized that, if you truly want to be able to lead, to be able to influence persons, you have to find that balance between, your intelligent quotient or your IQ, but also your emotional intelligence, your ability to can understand and read persons and their own emotions, your ability to control your own emotion as well, and to just be self-aware of what is happening around you, so you can figure what are the right levers to get that desired outcome. And I saw that maybe from a bad example, because these guys are not necessarily doing the right thing, but they were leaders in their own right? And so I had to figure out, how would I utilize that? Going through Cornwall, from a prefect to a deputy head boy, you're having the whole school looking towards you. And they're not going to, because you're a smart engineer, no different in the work environment. They want somebody who can motivate them, They want somebody who can unlock their own potential for them to be the best that they can be. And so I found that as a leader, your ability to connect to persons, talk about the self-awareness, is what will make that difference in terms of whether persons will follow you or not. Particularly if you don't want to be followed out of fear, but you want to lead out of respect. The persons understand the vision that you have and that you're aligned. When I started my career at JPS, similar to Rick, as a young engineer, you know, we come in, we're excited. At the time with Professor Shirley, he kind of wound us up and just release us, because you guys are specially selected and ladies from St. Augustine to come and change Jamaica. You guys will be the key to the success of this country. That's what he told us. You know? So in my mind, I was ready to change the world. And so it's important as leader, we instill that passion in the persons around us so that they too believe that they can change the world, right? I progressed from a young engineer to managing small project teams, eventually getting my own project to manage, you know, becoming excited, leading people, having the clashes, similar to engineering sparks, or persons like, who is this young guy coming on the team to lead us senior persons? What does he know? What value does he have to bring? And I learned pretty early in my career that, you know, particularly when you're leading persons who might be more experienced than you, who might be older than you, that a consultative approach is always important. So persons have an opportunity to share their opinion. At the end of the day, you have to make that decision, that call. And so you may end up have to becoming the autocratic in your decision making, right? Particularly during a crisis. But I find it's important to allow persons in the team that you lead to feel that they have a voice, that they have an opinion, and that they matter if you truly want them to follow you. You know, interestingly, especially for the participants here, I believe one of the biggest influence I had in my journey was through the JIE. When I joined the subcommittees on JIE, eventually when I joined council, I was able to see leaders in action, persons who had experienced, persons who had seen a lot, and I was able to understudy indirectly, agreed, to weigh the pros and cons of the different leadership styles and to hone my own skills. So I want to also encourage our participants that JIE is a good conduit where you can observe, you can understudy, you can participate, and also develop those skills prior to actually going into the work world. Because, you know, leadership, in my view, doesn't start when you get that engineering degree now. It starts in terms of what you are doing now in the space that you are at. How are you stepping forward to being bold? How are you willing to step out on a limb, even if you're not sure what the next step is? And how are you able to guide and influence persons who are around you? So I want to say to the panel, the participants here, that your journey starts now. I've seen, similar to Rick Case, having gone to JPS, becoming a director, you also have to influence above. Persons who are more senior to you, you may have to lead, even if you're leading from behind. And so I just want to understand that leadership in itself is a very dynamic role that you have to play, right? But the journey starts now. And that balance between your IQ and your EQ is what will make the big difference in terms of, are you able to emotionally connect? I said to persons, we spent 4 years honing our skills to become top problem solvers. Give us a differential equation, give us any, whether it's an electrical circuit, we deal with. Whether it's on the geotechnical, whether it's on the mechanical, we are sharp. Ask us to look into a room when we go in there and assess the mood of the room, how persons are feeling. Ask us to interpret, are we actually connecting? Is there active listening that is taking place? Ask us if we're open to feedback and are we communicating effectively. These are things that as engineers, we don't spend enough time on, and we may not have gone through a formal training. But I have found that the persons who are most successful as leaders have a very good balance between the two. They lead with their brain, but they also consciously lead with their heart, and they also are guided by their gut in terms of, is this right? My brain is saying, yes, mathematically, this makes sense. my heart is saying, but from the people perspective, this not might be the best thing to do. And my gut is now guiding me. How do I balance the two? So that's my takeaway. The journey starts now. EQ, IQ has to be balanced if we want to become effective leaders.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Engineer Campbell. Thank you very much. The smartest in the room, well, the leader in the room is not necessarily the smartest. Eh? Can we say that about our politicians? I don't know. Should I make that leap? Those that are leading us are not necessarily. And what it says is that leadership is not always about being smart, because we want to think that very smart people are in engineering. And sometimes we feel that knowledge and that power that we have by virtue of our intelligence is going to propel us into leadership automatically. But you're saying to us, Engineer Campbell, that no, not necessarily. It's about our ability to influence, generally speaking, and the extent to which we can establish a balance between our general intelligence and our emotional intelligence, EQ and IQ. Very, very good, good way to transition now into the question and answer session. So there we have it. We have gotten the feedback, the overviews from our panelists, and we are going to try now to drill down a bit, because what I'm hearing is different leadership styles, and we have to test and validate these perspectives. I mean, we're not going to let them off the hook so easily, right? We have to test and validate their claims to fame, right? Because we know, by the way, panelists and members listening here, we know how Jamaica run, don't it? Yes, we know how Jamaica run, you know. If it's not about links and so on and so forth, it's not about that in today's session. We have people who have demonstrated genuine leadership. So let me start by rallying back to Engineer Rick Case, who at the very top of the session pointed out that the answer is in the room, right? The answer is in the room. Engineer Rick Case, tell me.
Yes, sir.
Right. How did you make that first step? Was it consciously done? Was it that you were influenced by your seniors? Was it automatic? Was it conscious? In other words, some people may have set out at the very beginning to transition themselves into leadership. Did it happen for you naturally? Did it happen for you deliberately? Or were you led by some mentors and so on, or persons who saw you in the room and felt that you had potential? You said that it is in the room.
Wow, I think all the above. So they, just like Marvin, I think my thing went all the way back to high school with leadership roles. But what seemed to have, and then through university as well, but what seemed to have happened is that, I had good mentors, people who I look up to and still look up to today when I joined JPS. Even persons like Godfrey Boyd, who it might be unknown, people like Wayne McKenzie, who is now the CEO for Jamaica Energy Partners, people who were just trailblazers ahead of us. Fitzroy Vidal, who was at JPS, left and went to the ministry, and persons who saw something in you and gave you the opportunity to grow, right? I think I was trained by some of the very best at the time when I joined JPS. Some of those persons are a blessed memory now, but they basically created a space for you to grow and excel. So I pride myself initially of wanting to become an expert. So I wanted to become an expert. I wanted to know everything there was to know about the technical side of every aspect of all the work that I was doing. But then I got a rude awakening when I was exposed to formal leadership training. So I was flying high, I was having great success, revered by my peers and everything like that in the technical space. But then I did a 360-degree leadership circle evaluation. And Marvin would remember that too. It was evaluated as part of my entry into formal leadership training. And the feedback from my non-technical peers was alarming. The wave of emotions that went through me, it caused me to pause, reflect on life, and wonder what the hell is going on. And that I think was the turning point for me, where I started to take deliberate steps to improve my leadership. And some of what Natalie has said, some of what Peter has said, and most of what Marvin has said has now become infused into my leadership style, where, and I also believe that if that leadership to be effective, it's a continuous process of learning, evolving, it's situational, right? I decided to focus on my weaker areas to make them stronger. And I discovered so much more about people. That same active listening that Marvin spoke about was critical to the success that I have. So yes, the answer is in the room, because that means that you give everybody a space. The room accommodates everybody to be themselves, and for you to formulate a solution that everybody buys into and solves the problem.
Right. Thank you. Just a quick follow-up, and we're running a very tight schedule here, but are you there for suggestion? You mentioned a rude, an awakening experience that sent you in a particular direction to refocus and so on. Do you think that targeted coaching and training for leaders is absolutely necessary?
It is absolutely necessary for effective leadership. So you'll get to a point, but for you to be an effective leader, yes, there's a process of training that you have to go through: awareness, self-discovery. There are techniques that you have to apply for the success that we're talking about.
Great. So Engineer Sparks, we're talking about structured leadership now. We're kind of shifting a little bit.
Okay.
And we're talking about structured engagement of leaders. And you have been in several leadership positions at JIE and in your current role. Tell us about some of those examples of structured leadership programs that can help and assist. And we're going to get back to the natural traits and experience and influence, but let's talk a little bit about structured programs.
So as a leader, right, you come into the room and you have to come in with strategic vision for an organization. And what we have found that works for our team members and leaders is that we send them on what is considered to be a practical strategic management leadership program, right? Because you're leading a team and persons want to understand what the vision is. They want to know strategically where you're going. And therefore, one of the first things that we do for leaders is to get them to understand how to put their vision strategically into a position. That training is important. We also look at, I know Rick said he did 360. It's interesting, we all did 360. But after the 360, we did a program known as how to negotiate, how to communicate, negotiating, how to say the no with the yes. It's a very interesting program. And that was taught by someone who actually got the Olympics in Montreal for the Canadians. And that program taught the leaders how to communicate the no's properly, how to get the yes, as Marvin said, how to manage up, how to get your leaders who you report to be able to understand your vision, but also to give you that yes when they're actually saying no. So there are structured courses that leaders need to go into, but I just want to just dial back something. Marvin said something that I think we need to reaffirm. Not everyone who is smart will be a leader. And many times, persons made the mistake of saying, because you have ticked all the task box, you can be a leader. Some of the leaders that we need to have, and some of the leaders that we do have, they're not the smartest one in the room, but they have some of them an innate sense of leadership from high school, yes, from just doing what they do, and then we hone that skill, right? Some of the leaders are not the smartest one, and I agree, but you can hone them with the structured training. So you do the negotiation training, you do the strategic visioning training that they need, you do the communication training, but you need to do, I call it the soft skill training, the empathy training. It's one thing to say something, but you have to be able to empathize. You have to appreciate some of the nuances of a person, how you communicate with it. Peter said it. It's a lot more than just the number. It's about understanding sometimes that your team members have an issue. Marvin, you talk about coming to the room and understanding that somebody has an issue. In the safety culture that I have been trained in, you need to also read that culture, because you can have a safety incident. You have to come into a room and see, this gentleman is not here today. He's as a leader, he's not focused today. You can't send him on a job today. You might have a major safety incident. That is some of the training that you have to get your leaders to get. And that is some of the structured training that we need. Some of the schools and universities don't have it. Unfortunately, they do need it. Some of the universities that we go to, they do have it now. Some of them don't. But the businesses that we want to grow in Jamaica, they need to build out and that structured leadership training. And yes, Oneil, the politicians are not going to be engineers. The engineers are not going to be politicians, right? We are a lot more no nonsense that Marvin brings to the table, and we're a lot more strategic focus. And the trust factor from an engineer standpoint is really high, right? To get it done, we have to build that trust, and it comes with the training and what we bring to the table.
Great, thank you very much. I just want to emphasize the structured programs that you mentioned: communication, negotiation, strategic management training, soft skills training. And I think there was one more. I think those 4 covered it. Or there was
Those are
one?
they're the basic ones. There's some other
ones, right?
Yes.
Good. We're reaching somewhere with this program here. Okay, good. So I know Marvin was big on the interpersonal skills, right? So Engineer Campbell, tell us, give me 1 or 2, if you were to say, the big winners in the interpersonal skill sets that you consider to be ideal for a potential leader. What would those be? 1 or 2 big ones?
I'd say first, you need to have compassion and empathy for the persons who you have the privilege to lead. I think we need to understand that leadership is a gift, It's a privilege from those that are around us. And so that empathy and compassion is important if you are trying to build that relationship. There is what I need you to do, Oneil. But I also have to figure out, how does this also help you? And the journey that you are on, how can I help you along that journey? Right? I think that's very important to connect on that level. And I think, for me personally, one of the most fundamental things for me that forms the basis of leadership is trust and honesty. You have to have a deep reservoir of trust between yourself and the persons who you have the privilege of leading. And you need to be willing to have very open and honest conversation. Because if there is no trust, you will second guess, you may undermine, right? And you will not be willing to go beyond where you can see, because you are not trusting the leadership enough that they have a vision that's strong enough beyond what is directly in front of them. So I think, for me, the base is the trust, the honesty, the compassion, the empathy are very important to really build that relationship. Okay, so those are fundamental nuggets that I have found. I mentioned it before, Rick echoed it, activists. And many times as leaders, because we are smart and we're engineers and we're technically strong, we like to talk. We like to talk. And many a times, if we probably listen more, process more, commit to the moment, we'll be so much more effective. Because I agree with Rick, the solution is there, Our job is to unlock it. Our job not necessarily to find the solution, Our job is to unlock the full potential of the persons around us.
Thank you very much. I'm busy taking note there. Our job is to unlock. So, what is before us, right? I mean, you know, very, very powerful statements there. Empathy, compassion, critical, trust and honesty, our ability to unlock what is before us, eh? Very, 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 very deep stuff there. You know.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, sorry
Yes,
to
yes,
interrupt.
yes,
To
sorry, go
sort of
ahead.
build on what Marvin said.
Yes,
You know, I was taking notes
Engineer
while I was
Suah.
listening, and
Yes.
you know, those traits and those attributes are very important. I would probably add to that as a leader, a certain amount of humility and accountability. And those are the things that the people who we are leading look to you for, to see how you conduct yourself. You know, there was a mention earlier about, you know, respect. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is that in order to be respected, you must conduct yourself in a respectable manner. And it has to do with, you know, how people see you from day to day. Are you genuine? Are you sincere? Because those are the kinds of things I think that resonate with people who you are leading. And if they look at you and you are saying one thing and your behavior doesn't reflect that, then you know your legitimacy, so to speak, is on very shaky ground. So just wanted to sort of build on what I didn't want to lose that momentum that Marvin had started. So thank you for that.
No, absolutely. That sincerity, that accountability, that trust. People must recognize that in you. They must see that in you. Do you try to put it across falsely? I mean, if you don't, if naturally start coming across, you know, you don't. What do? If you feel you're not genuinely having those traits? I know we talk about the structured. Oh, sorry, Shauna, I come into you, Shauna. I see your hand. I mean, maybe to manage that a little bit better. But those are not. If let's say you see yourself not having those critical things that you mentioned, sincerity, you know, what do you do? What do you do? And you're interested in leadership. Are you perhaps in leadership? You don't, you know, you're not, you don't think that you are the most empathetic person in the world, you know, and so on. Engineer Suah, what do you do?
Well, you know, to add to that, I think, again, it goes back to something that Marvin said earlier. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to recognize, you know, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And if you're a truly conscientious person, and if you're truly, you know, sincere about what it is you're trying to do, then you can recognize these areas that where you are, you know, people say weak. Maybe the word is deficient or lacking, but you know, we're all smart, educated, intelligent people. We can recognize where we have shortcomings, and we can seek out various types of professional training to help us make up for those things and to grow and develop. You know, professional development and leadership skills for me is a lifelong process. I mean, you know, as mentioned earlier, I've been, you know, more than 40 years in professional practice, and I'm still attending conferences and seminars. You know, just to go off on a sidebar, my firm is a member of an association called the Geoprofessional Business Association. It's a national association here in the US, and they focus on the things that help us grow our practices and become better, not so much from a technical standpoint, but from a business standpoint, and how to help us manage better, you know, deepen our firms, become better at what we do. And again, at the core of that is a recognition that our staffs are important. They're people. They have lives. They have things that matter to them, and they're not just robots. And we need to recognize that. And we also we need to be self-aware, so that we also know when, you know, when we're going off course, and we also have to be willing to be humble and to listen when somebody comes to you and says, well, boss, you know, so and so and so, and you have to, it may be a criticism, and you have to be able to take that criticism in a positive manner and think about it. Because if the person didn't really care about you, you know, they would not have come and said anything to you. They'd have let you go on your merry way. So, you know, I know there are some people, and it's a human condition. We don't like to be criticized, but it's something that we have to learn to accept so that we can grow and develop and progress. And it's a lifelong process. So
yes.
So I'm still in it.
I'm seeing that human side. If I were to emphasize Anything else? It would be from your presentation, Engineer Suah, is the human side. You've been consistent in your elaboration. The human side, very important. Engineer, we're right on the wire. Engineer Shauna Kaye, you have your hand up quickly.
Patiently.
Thank you, Engineer Joseph. So first and foremost, I want to pause to acknowledge that
Yes.
Among the 4 panelists that we have here today, it's over 100 years of leadership experience. So I want to pause and acknowledge that collectively, and that's just 4 persons in this room as engineers, over 100 years of leadership experience. I'm sure we have been getting a lot of benefit just by having the conversations. But I want to ask, we speak about distrust, sincerity, and I know that in some of our positions we manage groups that are bargaining units or that are unionized, and there's a general air of distrust having to do with that integration. I don't know if many persons here have had that to handle, but I just want perhaps Engineer Suah, you're in heavy construction. I know that perhaps you would have had some interaction with unionized persons. How do you balance that? How do you lead and motivate those persons with a strong air of distrust?
Thanks. My role in heavy construction really was more on the supervisor side rather than actual, working with the construction forces. But I will say this, that again, you have to go back and look at, you have to you do have to get to know these people as individuals. So even though I was in a supervisor role and I was walking the job site constantly, you very quickly get to know these people, and you understand what their concerns are. Again, you're trying to motivate everybody to push together and get the job done. And sometimes you have to pull, sometimes you have to push, sometimes you have to be firm and forceful, and other times you have to be empathetic or sympathetic. You take 5 minutes and listen to somebody, take them off to the side, and at least hear what their grievance might be or their gross, and say, well, what about if you try it this way, or have you thought about doing it that way? So rather than giving them instructions, and sometimes you have to give instructions, other times you have to phrase it as a question and let the person take some ownership for that situation as well, and help them to resolve it themselves, so that they also feel a sense of empowerment. That is not you just coming down and telling them, do this and do that. Those things work across the board. And in a unionized situation, it's tougher because they have rules that they need to follow. And the relationship is many times borderline adversarial. And there is this sense of course, the unionized workers don't want to be seen as fraternizing with management. But I think separate and apart from that, at the end of the day, we all have the same objective, is to get the job done, on time, to a particular standard. Everybody goes home safely at the end of the day, and everybody feels a sense of accomplishment in the work that's being done. It is a radical change from the management style that I was first exposed to when I graduated from university. But even then, there were some inklings of that. I mean, anybody who's been on a construction site knows that there are certain interactions that you have, even with laborers, that are important, even though you might be the soup or the engineer. That you can still have these relationships with the people who are working on the job in other roles, in more more labor type roles. But that doesn't, at the end of the day, they're working just as hard as you. They're no less important than you in terms of getting the job done. They're there for a purpose. You are there for a purpose. And I think once we acknowledge that, instead of trying to lord it over them, it's like, look, guys, we're all here for the same purpose. Let's get the job done.
Great. Thank you very much for that question, and thanks for that response. To be honest, we need to transition into our question and answer session, which, to be honest, we have also been in. But I have one other question, burning question. I have to ask this question. Please allow me. Now, I've said I had a meeting earlier this week, last week, late last week. That includes the Minister of Education and leaders in other spheres, other, university spheres. And I mentioned that the statistics show that the top jobs, the most high-paying jobs in the US are primarily engineering in nature, right? And we had the statistics to show. But I also said that in the Jamaican context, credence and respect is not given to the engineering profession as given to professions such as law, medicine, among others, right? And what you don't find is that the profession is, in my view, is on a spectacle and commands a kind of leadership and attention in our country. So my question is, first of all, do you share this view? And secondly, do we need to have structured programs to get us to where we need to be in the leadership psyche of our country to drive development and so on? So that is an open question. I'm going to allow anybody who feels the need to just give an answer to just kindly, quickly, and do so. We'll take 2 responses on this. And if there's a burning third.
I'm not going to answer the question fully, but I'm going to support you to say that we have had so many symbols of engineering failure in Jamaica that I could understand why the public would feel that way. And the failure is not so much it's more on the constraints that were applied to the engineer in the solution that was required. And most of those constraints are politically in nature, or it might have other objectives that constrain it. So for example, every time the rain falls, we know what's going to happen to Marcus Garvey Drive. That to me is an example of an engineering failure, right? I'm sure the correct design was done and submitted for that project, but then when the cost came in to do it, then what was implemented most likely is a workaround that leaves us with a problem that we have now. So I can understand why the public would look at engineering and say, but them don't know what them are do, So I'm just adding that to the point that you raised, that the reflection of our work and our value oftentimes, the public doesn't benefit from it. You see structures going up, you see work being done that just, every time the road is done, why is it that the road has to be done 10 times instead of doing it once? So the public will lose trust in, engineering, and it's understandable. And I'll allow the panelists to add their own answer.
I think all members of the panelists may want to weigh in. So, okay, I saw Engineer Suah's hand up first. Yes.
Yeah, I would say this, that, I think, Rick, those comments are valid, and they're limited not just to Jamaica. We have similar situations here in the US as well. At the end of the day, engineering is driven by economics, and economics is driven by limited resources. I mean, that's really what it's about. I mean, if you think about it from an engineering design standpoint, we could design something, let's say a building that would resist a Category 5 hurricane, but it would be so expensive that you couldn't build it. There wouldn't be enough money to build it, and so engineering is very much a compromise between performance and cost. So that's a universal challenge that we have. The second thing I think is that, as engineers, despite the fact that we are trained to ask why not and to push the envelope, the sad truth is that when engineering failures take place, they're out in the open. As Rick said, everybody can see, the world can see them. There's a sort of lighthearted thing that I'd read somewhere about the difference between engineers and the other professions is that, doctors bury their failures and lawyers explain away their failures, but the failures of engineers are out there for the whole world to see. and we're faced with the pain of that. And so it sort of drives the way we do things. And so we tend to be a little bit cautious or conservative, if you want to use that term. And so we try, although we have the ability to push the envelope, we try not to push the envelope. We become comfortable. We become, in many ways, the profession has become a victim of its own success. We know what works, and we keep cranking the handle and doing it over and over again. And a lot of these things that we see in our infrastructure are driven by the fact that there are these constraints, political and economic, and also even some engineers themselves are unwilling to push the envelope for various reasons. So it's a multifaceted problem in my opinion.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I want to take now from Engineer Campbell quickly.
All right, I'll just be quick. So totally agree with with Rick in terms of physically how the engineer problems manifest themselves, and Peter about how we try to mind economics. But I think one of the failings of us as engineers though is us not pushing to be in a position of greater influence. We talk about politicians like a bad set and a bad breed. But the truth is we actually need more engineers involved in politics to be driving some of those decisions, to be informing some of those decisions as well, but also to rationalize to the greater public why some of the decisions are being made. You ever see Nigel Clark, Dr. Clark? When Dr. Clark decided I'm going to spend a lot here and I'm going to cut there, he comes and he presents a grand plan as a financial economist, and they buy into it. When an engineering decision is being made, Rick, that listen, we're going to flood out Marcus Garvey Drive, and they're going to cost us $10 because right now they're going to cost us $100 to repair it. I would have $100. There's nobody communicating to the public around why these decisions are being made. Or even from a political standpoint, to truly influence why it's made. The politicians are primarily persons who did soci or that faculty, the social sciences. A lot of them may have also done, law, a couple of doctors, agreed? Primary lawyers. So they're always going to position law as being a critical function, in my view, for anybody to survive. Every financial transaction in this country, and in this, you need a lawyer. Why? Because they have made it so. Engineers, I believe, need to put ourselves in a position where a lot of these political decisions that are being made for the greater good, we are at that table. And I find that we are not always at the table to influence and to guide and to impact the knowledge that we have. We're taking the decisions that are being made, even if they're not the best. And we are then being asked to execute, to implement, even within the constraints, as Peter mentioned. But are those the best decisions? And I find that more engineers need to start getting actively involved in politics. And I believe that will make a big difference.
But Marvin, just a quick one, jumping on what Marvin said. But Marvin, I think the challenge is, I think there's a comment in here about what is the right answer, the best answer. Someone feels that question, Rick, and you were trying to answer that question. It was Kamala. Many times we know what the right answer is. We know what we need to do. As engineers, our engineer colleagues will tell us, we know exactly what the solution is, but Peter is correct. We don't have the money. Right? When something is emotive and you are in the space whereby you're driving your car, Marcus Garvey, every day and it's flooding out and you can't get home, you don't want an engineer to tell you anything. You're going to fix the problem. Patch it up for today, patch it up for tomorrow, and we'll move on and forget about it. As engineers in the room, our job is to ensure that, as you're correct, that in the back room, we're influencing the long-term vision decision. We are in that space to make that decision. The lawyers are complaining about liability. We should be in the space as well, Marvin, to say to them, yes, the liability is there, but 2 years from now, you will pay more. Show them the maths. We don't want to do that. We think that our numbers speak for themselves. And the numbers alone don't speak for themselves. And as leaders, as you develop your leadership skill, your sphere of influence, how you communicate, how you negotiate, how you bring to the table the correct solution and get that buy-in. As engineers, we have not, some of us, developed that skill. We think the numbers will speak for themselves. And you don't see it. It is obvious. The numbers, and we're like, them done. That's why we don't go. I see that's why we don't talk to society people, because they don't understand numbers. But as engineers, it is our job, and we need to develop that skill where you're correct. We bring, as Peter said, that people skill in the room. We have to bring that people skill, because if we don't bring that people skill in the room, We are not going to have engineers in the influential space that we need to have to fix the Marcus Garvey, to fix the Riverton City problem. Every minute you have smoke going over there, and we're wondering why we keep burning down the people in place, and we're having all of this smog to fix all the issues that we don't have to have a Mr. Nigel Clark after a while trying to explain to us why he has to spend. It will be part of what we do. Do what I think it was there's a South American country whereby every single board that is formed, they have an engineer on it. Because of the same, yes, I can't remember which country it is, because of the fact that we bring that level of knowledge, influence, trust to a debate. People will trust us because they understand that we understand what drives the fundamentals. That trust factor is important. I think we bring that. We need to get in there, Marvin. I'm going to elect you for the next member of parliament for my constituency. Come talk to me. We're in Manchester. We are very team.
Interesting.
If I could just
interesting.
add to that, there's one other aspect to it that occurred to me, and you can sort of correct me if I'm wrong, but we talk about numbers and we talk about cost, and a lot of times we focus on capital cost. We focus on capital cost of getting something built because of the source of the funding. So funding is available for capital cost. There's not necessarily funding available for operations and maintenance costs, and everything that's built has to be maintained at some point. And we're in situations where we will recommend a higher capital cost because of a lower overall life cycle operations and maintenance cost. And again, these are things that we understand as engineers. I don't know necessarily if the decision makers are aware necessarily of this, because they're focused on capital cost. You go to tell the public, when we're going to build this highway and it's going to cost $400 million US, and the highway opens and everybody is standing there on a bridge or on a road or looking at something and saying, this is wonderful, it's done, this is what we have done for Jamaica. And there's no discussion about, okay, now that it's there, how do we operate and maintain that? Because the funding is not coming. We have no idea where that funding is coming from. We have a problem that needs to be addressed. We've addressed it, it looked good on TV, everybody is happy. And 5, 10, 12 years down the road, we're having another problem because there was nothing there for operations and maintenance, or that was necessarily taken into consideration. So again, I'm not trying to necessarily put the blame on the other professionals other than engineers who are involved in these decisions. I'm also saying that there are other things that we can look into as engineers to put on the table and say, okay guys, you're accustomed to this, what about looking at it from this perspective?
Thank you. We may have to put the lid on it right there. Thank you. I think Engineer Suah, that the JUTC may very well be in that situation about initial capital versus operations and maintenance costs. But yes, thank you very much. We have 3 hands up in the general attendances. I know the questions that are in the chat and the question and answer section of our presentation here are being responded to, thanks to a few of the panelists who have been actively responding. So I hope that the answers are sufficient and we don't need to field them here. So thank you, panelists, for actively answering those questions. And others, you can feel free to continue those answers there in the chat. Very active thing going on there, but I see, well, there were 3 hands. I'm seeing now one. Richard Delissa. I'm going to take Mr. Delissa. No. Go ahead, Mr. Delissa, and welcome.
Thanks very much, Engineer Joseph.
Yes.
A wonderful discussion. I know that it was recorded. I think it needs to be made available as a module at our different engineering degree programs, because it's an area that is not usually dealt with, and it is so critical as an underpinning for successful engineering. I want to quickly acknowledge my hallmate, Peter Suah, and say that we currently continue to engage in a chat that allows us to further advance the interaction that brings a wider base of knowledge. And in a similar way, what I loved about what was being shared earlier, I was like a cheerleader in the background cheering on, because I said, whoa, this is an aspect of engineering that is hardly ever dealt with, what you call the soft skills. the things that work behind the scenes that lubricate and make things happen based on vision, strategy, etc., etc. One little thing that came to me though, having spent many years both in the construction, installation, and now mainly in the design, is that as much as it is such a necessary aspect to get things working, one of the things that we always have is that overarching pressure from management, CEO, board, or client to solve the problems at the least cost and in the quickest time. And although, you know, this nice, warm, cuddly feeling of having our workers, employees, or team members working together well and having all of this, there's this pressure. And there has to be a balance. And I would just add to the amazing contributions from all the panelists that we have to have the strategy to cause buy-in and accountability.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest challenge is not just to get people to contribute and feel like, boy, you know, yes, they're part of decision making, but to also own the solutions and the failings, and to have that willingness to go beyond just what is required. You know, they will follow the leader, as the mighty men of God in the Bible that went and got water from a well in the enemy camp to bring back to give to David. Yes, people will follow us in the trenches wherever we go. However, at the end of the day, it must also be that we find a way to create that balance, that they know that achieving the solutions is what we're after. And that is where I think the rubber meets the road. We have to find a way to impress upon people the importance of life cycle cost.
Yes.
As well, because the people who are making the decisions are often, as we say, they feel handcuffed by limited resources. But at the end of the day, if we're not trying to sell as a community of engineers to our financiers, to those who have to find resources, that and find a way to effectively communicate this, sell it. The life cycle cost is what's going to determine the success ultimately of any and every endeavor. And it's something we're missing in our engineering enterprise. That's what I want to share.
Life cycle cost. Thanks. Do I call you engineer Delisa? Forgive me if I don't know you. Yes.
Yes.
Good. All right. So we had two other hands in the chat, but they're no longer there. Okay, Neville Walker's hand is up again, and I'm going to go quickly to Shauna and then Neville Walker. That's gonna be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. We've been beyond our time, but because of the excitement that you're experiencing. Shauna, go ahead.
Thanks, Engineer Josephs. I want to direct this one at Rick. Rick, so you know we're on a professional platform together, that's LinkedIn, and one thing that I've always noticed with how you lead your team is that you publicly acknowledge the value that they add to your team. And it's something that I've always admired. LinkedIn has a feature whereby you can showcase the value of the persons that report to you publicly. And I noticed that Rick uses that feature. And every time I see you posting those acknowledgements, Rick, it for me, it encourages me. I just wanted to understand a little bit more about how your team views that sort of an acknowledgement.
I love it. But the acknowledgement is not just on LinkedIn, it is done in person. So part of it is that we celebrate our successes and we pat each other on the back, right? So it's not just on LinkedIn, it's genuine right across the board. What LinkedIn allows me to do is to reach some of the people who might not necessarily be in direct contact with, but we have to appreciate them, persons who might be in the finance area, legal, and some of those other areas who we don't often, in the same space all the time. But for me, it's a pleasure. It's something that I enjoy doing, enjoy the feedback from the team. when they feel congratulated. Somebody came to me one time and said, boss, you make me feel like somebody, you know, because like over 100 people who they didn't know liked it, and persons were commenting on it and commending them. So, you know, it is really, as Marvin had said earlier, how your authentic leadership is. People appreciate when you say thanks.
That's an interesting motivational tool there. So good to know. Thank you very much. And we also had Neville Walker. Sorry, Neville Walker, you still wanted to? Your hand went up twice. Well, 3 times perhaps. Do you still want to make that contribution? All right. Going once, going twice. Yes, he's on. Neville? Okay, good. All right, so it sounds like this is where we will end this session today. I think it was an excellent session. So at this time, it takes me great pleasure to hand over the session to our engineer. Let me see, we hand over to our engineer. Help me, Shauna.
Michael James.
Michael James, who will do the closing remarks. But in terms of my contribution here, very well done, very well done, team, and thank you for the contribution that you have made.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, Engineer Oneil Joseph. You know, I didn't even realize that the session would have ended so quickly. I believe we could have continued talking about this for another hour or so. But of course, we have to get back to our relative jobs and everything. All right. So first and foremost, I want to thank everybody for joining us. You know, without you being here, the ideas and plans of the JIE would have just been, you know, us talking to ourselves. So it's good that you kind of came out and, you know, took advantage of the opportunity provided to you by the JIE, right? I also want to thank each and every one of our panelists, you know, Engineer Rick Case, who would have mentioned that, you know, the answer is in the room, right? And Engineer Natalie Sparks and Engineer Peter Suah would have mentioned, you know, it starts early. They mentioned, you know, them being involved in leadership and stuff like that at a very early age. We kind of tied in with our next panelist, Engineer Marvin Campbell, you know, who expressed sentiments of the journey starts now, all right? And, you know, as engineers, as in this session, we look beyond the numbers. You know, it is good that we balance our IQ and our EQ. Right, you know, control our emotions, you know, and help to instill passion in the people that we lead. Right, so thank you each and every one of our panelists. Right, I also want to mention, you know, this is a part of a series of events or a series of webinars that, you know, the JIE is seeking to have. All right, so after this, we'll be going into our developers forum. You know, that's every Thursday for the month of March. So like how you turn out for this one, you know, encourage everyone to turn out for our sessions or webinars of the Developers Forum for every Thursday in the month of March. And also, if you want to be a part of the activities of the JIE, which, you know, each and one of our panelists would have mentioned, the next activity that we will be doing as a council will be joining the Andrews Girls School for their career day on Thursday. So if you'd want to be a part of that, you can reach out to the JIE at jie@cwjamaica.com. All right. And of course, this session was recorded. And if you want to watch it and all the other webinars, you can visit the JIE on its YouTube channel at JIE Jamaica. All right. Follow us on our different social media at JIE Jamaica. You know, that's Facebook, Instagram, all of them, Twitter, all of them. All right. So thank you again, everyone. You know, on behalf of the Jamaica Institution of Engineers, our President, Engineer Godfrey Boyd, and our chairperson for the Mechanical Division, Engineer Shauna Kaye East-Bevan, right, as we continue to, you know, as a council, provide opportunity for us, for each and every one, you know, as we look on engineering being the driver of manufacturing, production, economic growth, and health. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
good day, everyone. Well
All
done.
right, take care now. Excellent webinar. Thank you.